Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Oh my goodness, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a book that she wrote after her partner's name was Mary Malone. After Mary Malone died, she wrote a book of poetry. Mary Oliver wrote a book of poetry called Thirst. And the whole book is really about her grief and how she tried to reconcile, that. So many of the poems that we're reading tonight are from that book because she was very good friends with Coleman Barks. She was very much influenced by Sufism, but she went to church and really tried to pull her understanding of Christianity and of church into her grieving. And then she talks about it in the poetry about how that was both successful and not successful. And she's just very forthright about how church helped her and how church did not help her. And I love that honesty about her. And so those are some of the poems we're actually going to be pulling from today. So yeah. I sent the link out today. I normally send it out Tuesday. We may be just a super small group. So, it might be smaller than usual.
Yeah, I saw the link today and I copied and pasted into the calendar, but yeah, it was kind of late.
It was late. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least you're recording it. It's going to be exceptional.
Yeah. I think it'll be fun for people to hear who want to encounter her work more often.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fingers crossed you can have her back again when there's a little bit more notice.
Yes. When I do a better job. Letting people know about it. Yeah. So we have one person. No, we have two. Woohoo! We have two people.
You got three. You got three. You got four.
You're leaving, right?
I won't be staying.
Yeah.
But I think Fresh is here, and then there's three others.
Good. Yeah.
And I'm gonna be leaving a little bit too, so because I got another Zoom call.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Thank you, Angela, Jay Baba. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Well, we'll get started. I sent the link out late, so we will be a small group, but I want to do a check-in with everybody, and if everyone wants to say how you're doing and your name and where you're from. I'm Tracey. I'm here in Asheville, and I spent a few hours yesterday and today reading some of the Mary Oliver work that we're going to be listening to today, and it's just always very transformative for me to hear her work, so I'm happy to be sharing it with you guys.
Hey Tracey, Jay Baba.
Hey Thursday, Jay Baba.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Just had a wonderful 2 hours on the beach. I am renovated and ready for Mary Oliver.
Yay! Mary she was very good friends with Coleman Barks.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Birds of a feather.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Thursday.
All right.
I'm Hugh Huntington, Weaverville.
Beaverville?
Weaverville.
Weaverville. Where is that?
It's kind of a suburb of Asheville.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Are you going to say how you're doing? She said.
Well, I'm doing great.
Good.
I just completed 2 books on how the soul interacts with the physical body, and how we leave this body, go back, and we join these groups that we learn and teach and instruct, and then we make a contract to become back again, and we work through the whole thing. And one of the biggies I got of it was I always assumed my soul kind of joined and had to put up with my ego. And what the book makes really clear is if you pause and listen, your soul is talking to you all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know whether that was my Baptist upbringing or whatever, but that's really been very freeing. It's like, okay. Along with that has come a release of time. Time moves faster. The older we get, it moves faster. But I just finally come to the realization that if I go out and come back again, and go out and come back again, well, what is time? I got to get to the dentist on time, but the rest of this doesn't make any difference.
Right.
Time was really associated with, oh, when am I going to die?
Yeah.
If you put the focus on the soul, it's not about dying the body.
Yeah. Isn't there that saying, a day in heaven is 1,000 years on earth, from the Bible? So beautiful.
Yeah.
It just completely changes your whole view on time.
And there are lots of parallels in this book to what Baba just said to us about karma and how we're responsible for that. And he doesn't do any, the last chapter is on spiritual, but it's not, he doesn't talk about religion at all.
Nice.
So it's been very, very interesting book. So I'm kind of flying high.
Yeah.
High with no drugs.
What is the name of the book? What's the name of the book?
Journey of the Soul is the first one, and Destiny of the Soul is the second one. I think, hold on a second.
Yeah, I've read them. They're awesome.
Who's the author?
Michael somebody or other. What?
Yeah, Michael Newton. This is the second book.
What's the author's name, Hugh?
Michael Newton. Newton.
Newton. Yeah.
I found the first book a little boring through the first half. I was about ready to put it down, except a friend of mine talked about how much he enjoyed it. The second half came alive, and I could hardly put down the second book. I mean, I got a little tired of reading some of the cases, but I skipped very few in the second book, and it's twice as thick as the first one. So anyway, I found it fascinating. There's a quote in here that I read to another group I'm a part of. I do a lot of work with Qigong, and there's a real parallel between Qigong. It says, the spiritual externalist waits for reunification with the Creator after death, while the internalist feels part of a oneness each day.
Nice. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay.
Are you standing up?
I'm standing up in the kitchen because I'm going to go blank in a minute because I'm hungry.
Oh, okay. Hi, this is Paula Pam.
Hey, Paula.
How are you, everybody?
Hi.
Hi. From Nashville here, and I'm just really, really tired tonight. I got to see I got to spend time with my granddaughter today, and 5 hours, and I haven't really had a lot of face-to-face time with her for a while, so it was really lovely. But I had to kind of set my alarm this morning, which I'm not on that kind of time the last 3 months at all, with no alarm. Oh, there's Miss Betty.
Hi, how are you?
I love it, Miss Betty. You are so close to me right now.
I know. Isn't
You're
it
like a on my lap. Anyway,
tell me who's your son? Who's
Taylor.
Taylor. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Taylor, who has David's birthday.
Oh, wow.
And they sat on the tractor together.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Caliana is
we have to have a side. We have to go.
I know, a side conversation. Okay, we will. Anyhow, I'm good, and it's wonderful to see my old friend Betty.
Yeah.
Just wonderful. Betty, I'll call you. I'm going to call you.
Lovely. Okay.
Too much catching up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and I love Mary Oliver's poetry, and so.
Thank you, Paula.
Are we talking about Mary Oliver's poetry today? I thought
we are.
Not Max.
No, that was a little snafu.
Oh, a glitch. Okay, well, gee, Mary Oliver.
It was a poetry glitch.
Fabulous. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Betty, where are you from? And tell us something about you today.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, Thursday and I had the most remarkable morning with, about Mohammed. Oh my goodness. It was just a lovely program. Oh, yeah, that was. Have you folks, were any of you folks there Thursday? You should, she has quite a story. Yeah.
Betty, say where you're from.
I'm from Scotts Mills, Oregon. And here's my backyard.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that's where we have had Sahabas for many years. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jay. Thank you, Jay Baba.
That was certainly our morning, was Mohammed. My goodness, what a
Wow.
great adventure that was.
Through the circle of friends?
Yes, it was a, what would you say? Sharing memories, everybody sharing memories. And Thursday, she's still at the very end. My goodness, there was a man out of the blue who had spent years with him. Jake, is that right? Are you still here?
I'm here, sweetie. And you know, I think we want to give the meeting back to Tracey.
All right.
Thank you.
You're good.
For everybody to catch up and say hello, though. I'm happy we can do that on Zoom. So grateful that we can do that. So yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit. We're just going to listen to the poetry of Mary Oliver. And Mary Oliver, for those of you, I think most of you probably know who she is, but for those of you who do not know she was an American poet who died last year in her early 80s. She won the Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award. And she lived with her partner for 40 years, who was a woman named Mary Malone, who was the first photographer for the Village Voice and opened the first photography gallery on the East Coast. And she died in 1985 at the age of 80. They lived together for 40 years on Cape Cod. And Mary Oliver was so grief-struck that she contracted breast cancer. And she actually had stage 4 breast cancer, and she survived it. And so she wrote a book about her grief. And it was also about her her attempt to reconnect with Christianity and the church in order to assuage her grief. And apparently that was both successful and not successful for her. And so she writes about it in this book called Thirst, which is what we're going to read from. And so I'm going to substitute, she mentions the word God and Lord in the poems, and I'm just going to substitute Baba's name for it because I think it helps us to connect on another level. But just say that you know that she did not use the word Baba. She was good friends with Coleman Barks, the Rumi translator, so she was super aware of Sufi poetry and Sufism. And so if you would like to hear an interview with her, for those of you who love her work, there's a fabulous interview that she did with Krista Tippett, who has a radio program called On Being. And that program interviews Thich Nhat Hanh and Coleman Barks and Brother Stendhal, just really wonderful spiritual teachers and authors. I recommend that series very highly. And Mary Oliver did not like to be interviewed, and she was very shy, but she did this interview, which is fantastic, and just tells some great stories if you'd like to hear it. And I put it up here in the chat so you can see it. But well, there's a great quote that I really love by Mary Oliver, and it says, "Attention without feeling is only a report." And I just want to open with that because I think there's something really to that the great tenderness and empathy that Mary Oliver brought to her work that helps us to connect with nature on a deeper level and on a spiritual level. So I'm going to start out with a very famous poem by her. We're mostly going to read her not famous poetry, but this one is quite famous, and it's called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who gazes around with her enormous and complicated eyes, whose jaws move back and forth instead of up and down. Now, she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now, she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall into the grass, how to kneel into the grass, how to be idle and blessed, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So when I sent the link out today, Susan Paul, who lives here in Asheville and is an acupuncturist and a longtime Baba lover, reminded me that Paulus Berenson was good friends with Mary Oliver, and Paulus Berenson actually lived here in Asheville, and I had a chance to recite poetry with him. Really fabulous guy, and he was very good friends with Susan Paul. And Paulus Berenson used to, by the way, if you will mute your mic while we're reading, somebody's got some good wind coming by, just mute your mic and then we won't hear that. And then we'll open the mics up at the end for some Q&A. Paulus Berenson loved Mary Oliver's work and memorized it. And he told her one day that when he would recite her poetry, he just would change a few lines and a few words, that he just thought it made it have more, he thought it made it a little bit more flowing. And she was like, you cannot change my poetry. You just can't just change someone's poem. And so he recited a few of her poems to her with these slightly changed lines and words. And she said, oh, I love it. Yeah, keep changing them. And I just thought that was such a great telling story about Mary Oliver and how little ego she had involved in her work. So this is a poem called When I Am Among the Trees, and it's from her book, Thirst, that I mentioned. When I am among the trees, especially the willow and the honey locust, equally the beech and the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me in daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself in which I have goodness and discernment and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from the branches, and they call out again. It's simple, they say, and you too have come into this world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine. I have a plaque in my house that my friend Chiba Clark made, local ceramicist, and it's from that poem. And it says, walk slowly and bow often. I love it. This one is called When the Roses Speak. As long as we are able to be extravagant, we will be hugely and damply extravagant. Then we will drop foil by foil to the ground. This is our unalterable task, and we do it joyfully. And they went on. Listen, the heart shackles are not as you think: death, illness, pain, unrequited hope, not loneliness, but they are lassitude, rue, vainglory, fear, anxiety, selfishness. Their fragrance all the while rising from their blind bodies, making me spin with joy. That is called When the Roses Speak, I Pay Attention. This one's called Making the House Ready for the Lord. Dear Baba, I have swept and I have washed, but still nothing is as shining as it should be for you. Under the sink, for example, is an uproar of mice. It is the season of their many children. What shall I do? And under the eaves and through the walls, the squirrels have gnawed their ragged entrances. But it is a season when they need shelter. So what shall I do? The raccoon limps into the kitchen and opens the cupboard while the dog snores and the cat hugs the pillow. What shall I do? Beautiful is the new snow falling in the yard and the fox who is staring boldly up the path to the door. And still, I believe you will come, Baba. You will. When I speak to the fox, the sparrow, the lost dog, the shivering sea goose, you will know that I am really speaking to you whenever I say, as I do all morning and all afternoon, come in, come in.
Tracey,
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask you, in the places that you put Baba, what did she say?
Lord.
Lord. Okay.
Sometimes she uses Lord, sometimes she uses God. It sort of depends.
Okay.
On the poem. This one's called Those Days. And this is a poem where she talks about her partner who died, and not to compare people's relationships because no point in that, right? But it reminded me a little bit of, I don't know if many of you all know this, but Rumi did not write poetry until Shams died. Shams of Tabriz, who he had prayed very fervently for a soul friend. And then Shams of Tabriz came and was that person, and then was either run out of town or murdered. We don't exactly know which. It seems to me that it's leaning towards murdered. And he was either murdered or run out of town by his actual disciples, and in particular, one of his sons. And Rumi was so, I guess you would say, advanced that instead of crumbling under the weight of that grief, he began to spontaneously recite poetry, and did not recite poetry, did not write poetry until Shams died. And so really it came from his loss and his grief. And it reminds me a little bit of Rumi writing about the loss of Shams, this poem. When I think of her, I think of the long summer days. She lay in the sun, how she loved the sun, how we spread our blanket and friends came and the dogs played. And then I would get restless and go up and go off into the woods and the fields. And the afternoon would soften gradually. And finally, I would come home through the long shadows and into the house where she would be, my glorious welcoming, tan and hungry, ready to tell the hurtless gossips of the day, and how I listened leisurely while I put around the room flowers in jars of water, daisies, butter and eggs, and everlastings, until, like our lives, they trembled and shimmered everywhere. This one is called The Vast Ocean Begins Just Outside Our Church, the Eucharist. Something has happened to the bread and the wine. They have been blessed. What now? The body leans forward to receive the gift from the priest's hands, and then the chalice. They are something else now from what they were before this began. I want to see Baba in the clouds or on the shore, just walking, beautiful man, and clearly someone else besides. On the hard days, I ask myself if I ever will. Also, there are times my body whispers to me that I have.
So does she say Jesus then, or God, or Lord?
She did say Jesus on that one.
Jesus.
Yeah, she did. This one is called 6 Recognitions of the Lord. Oh, I have to tell you a funny Mary Oliver story. I met Mary Oliver when she came to Atlanta. I have a friend who works for Jimmy Carter, and I introduced her to Daniel Ladinsky's Hafez, and she and I became very close friends from that introduction to the work of Hafez, who she proceeded to carry in her pocketbook every day for the next year. So Mary Oliver came to Atlanta to Emory University, who has a rare book and manuscript library. And Mary Oliver did not make, she didn't make public appearances very often, so it was really a special thing to go see her. So my friend called me and she said, the tickets were $150. It was a fundraiser. She said, hey, I bought you a ticket, come to Atlanta to see Mary Oliver. So I go. It's this very fancy building, and there's men in white gloves serving drinks, and it's, you know, very highbrow. And we're having drinks and hors d'oeuvres, and then we go into the next room where we're going to have dinner. And we get there kind of early. There's nobody in the room, but there's Mary Oliver sitting at a table. It's going to be dinner, and she's going to be the speaker, and she's sitting there in a velour jumpsuit. I was so happy that she just didn't care, you know, and just wore whatever she wanted. And so I say to my friend Rita, who went with Jimmy Carter to pick up his Nobel Peace Prize, and also she literally has traveled all over the world with him for 30 years. I turn over to my shoulder and I say to Rita, look, it's Mary Oliver. Well, I look over at Rita again, and Rita's gone, and she's now there talking to Mary Oliver, and eventually everybody figures out that that's Mary Oliver. She's just surrounded by people. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, really, Tracey, you had an opportunity to meet Mary Oliver and you didn't do it. What's wrong with you? So we're sitting there having dinner, and I am just, you know, smoke is kind of pouring out of my ears the entire time because I'm thinking about how I really missed this opportunity to meet Mary Oliver. And at literally every 7 feet on the walls of this very fancy restaurant that we're in, it says no photography, no video. Just like literally every 7 feet it says this, you know, that they really want to get this message across. But it was, this was about 10 years ago, and this was right when the iPhones had just come out, and Rita had an iPhone. So I'm sitting there really mulling over my destiny, which I'm very upset about. And finally, at the end of dinner, I said, you know, Rita, technically, your iPhone is not a camera. And I think we should stalk Mary Oliver to the bathroom, and we should ask her for a photograph with your iPhone, because she will look us in the eyes and she will love us and she will know we're trustworthy and she will say yes. And that was exactly what happened. So I have this photograph of me holding Mary Oliver's hand. I was just so thrilled to meet her. And she was just, she just looked us, locked eyes with us, right, vibed us out there on the spot. And it was just such a beautiful experience because she realized we were her friends, and she said yes. So I have to tell you that story about meeting Mary Oliver. Stalked her to the bathroom. Okay, 6 recognitions of the Lord. I know a lot of fancy words. I tear them from my heart and my tongue, and then I pray. Baba, mercy is in your hands. Pour me a little. And tenderness too. My need is great. Beauty walks so freely and with such gentleness. Impatience puts a halter on my face, and I run away in the green fields, wanting your voice, your tenderness, but having to do with only the sweet grasses of the fields against my body. When I first found you, I was filled with light. Now the darkness grows, and it is filled with crooked things, bitter and weak, each one bearing my name. I lounge on the grass, so simple. Then I lie back until I am inside the cloud that is just above me, but very high and shaped like a fish. Then I enter the place of not thinking, not remembering, not wanting. When the blue jay cries out his riddle in his carping voice, I return. But I go back. The threshold is always near. Over and back, over and back. Maybe I rub my face as though I have been asleep, but I have not been asleep. I have been, as I say, inside the cloud, or perhaps the lily floating on the water. Then I go back to town, to my own house, my own life, which has now become brighter and simpler, somewhere I have never been before. Of course, I have always known you are present in the clouds, in the black oak that I especially adore, and the wings of birds. But you are present too in the body, listening to the body, teaching it to live, instead of all that touching with disembodied joy. We do not do this easily. We have lived so long in the heaven of touch, and we maintain our mutuality, our physicality, even as we begin to apprehend the other world. Slowly, we make our appreciative response. Slowly, appreciation swells to astonishment, and we enter the dialogue of our lives that is beyond all understanding or conclusion. It is mystery. It is love of Baba. It is obedience. Feed me this day, Baba, with the fragrance of the fields and the freshness of the oceans which you have made. Help me to hear and to hold in all dearness those exacting and wonderful words of our remembrance of you when you said, "Follow me." Every summer, the lilies rise and open their white hands until they almost cover the black waters of the pond. I give thanks, but it does not seem like adequate thanks. It doesn't seem festive enough or constant enough, nor do the names of you or the words of thanksgiving come into it often enough. Everywhere I go, I am treated like royalty, which I am not. I thirst and am given water. My eyes thirst, and I am given the white lilies on the black water. My heart sings, but the apparatus of singing does not convey half what it feels and means. In spring, there's hope. In fall, the exquisite, necessary diminishing. In winter, I am as sleepy as any beast in its leafy cave. But in summer, there is everywhere the luminous sprawls of gifts. The hospitality of you, Baba, and my inadequate answers as I row my beautiful temporary body through the water lily of this world.
I love that last line. That's so beautiful.
No, right? She's quite good at hitting it right on the money when it comes to the last line of her poems. It's something she excels at beautifully. I'm only reading 3 poems that are not from this book, and this is one of them, and it's called The Journey, and this is one of her famous poems. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles saying, "Mend my life." But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Mary Oliver was so poor that when the day that she went to her mailbox and found out that she had won the Pulitzer, she had actually she had walked to the dump in her town of Cape Cod looking for shingles to repair her roof because she did not have the money to buy shingles. And she was walking back with her plastic bag full of shingles, and the postman was there, and he said, "You have something from the Pulitzer Prize?" And you know, he sort of knew what it was because he knew she was a poet. And I just love that story, that she was so poor that that's what she was doing when she discovered she won the Pulitzer. This poem is called "More Beautiful Than the Honey Locust Tree Are the Words of Baba." In your house, Baba, I have stumbled in recitation, and in my mind I have wandered. I have interrupted worship with discussion. The Lord forgives many things, so I've heard. The deer came into the field. I saw her peaceful face and heard the shuffle of her breath. She was sweetened by merriment and not afraid, but bold to say whose field she was crossing, spoke the tap of her foot. It is Baba's and it is mine. But only that she was born into the poem that Baba made and that called the world. And the goldfinch, too. And the black pond I named my little sister, since otherwise I had none. And the muskrat with his shy hands. And the tiny life of the single pine needle, which nevertheless shines. And the priest in her beautiful vestments, her hand over the chalice, and clouds moving. All day, I watch the sky changing from blue to blue. For you, Baba, are forever, and I am like a single day that passes. All day, I think thanks for this world, for the rocks and the tips of the waves, for the tupelos and the faded roses, for the wind. For you, Baba, are forever, while I am like a single day that passes. You are the heart of the cedars of Lebanon and the Douglas firs, the bristlecone and the willow. It's close to hopeless for what I want to say. The redbird has said already and better in 1,000 trees. The white bear, lifting one enormous paw, has said it better. You cannot cross one hummock or furrow, but it is your, Baba, your holy ground. I had such a longing for virtue. I wanted you, Baba, to be as close as the medallion that I wear. I wanted to read and serve, to touch the altar linen. Instead, I went back to the woods where not a single tree turns its face away. Instead, I prayed, Baba, let me be something useful and unpretentious. Even the chimney swift sings. Even the cobblestones have a task to do and do it well. Baba, let me be a flower, even a small one, or a sparrow, or the smallest bright stone in a ring worn by someone brave and kind, whose names I will never know. Baba, when I sleep, I feel you near. When I wake and you are already wiping the stars away, I rise quickly, hoping to be your wild child, the rose, the honey maker, the honey vine, a bird shouting its joy as it floats through the gifts you have given us. Another day. If you're not a Mary Oliver fan, you are now, right? So good.
So most of these ones where you're substituting Barbara, are they mostly from thirst?
Yes.
I've read quite a lot of her poetry, and she doesn't say God or Lord or Jesus very much at all.
That's right. That's why I chose.
Curious.
Yeah, that's why I chose this particular book to read from, because she was so grief-stricken, she made some ventures into more religious poetry in an attempt to assuage her grief. And so it really is a very unique book of her work. And it was specifically why I chose it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. This one is called Praying. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together, and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks, and a silence in which another voice might speak. This one is called The Place I Want to Get Back to. The place I want to get back to is where, in the pine woods, in the moments between the darkness and the first light, 2 deer came walking down the hill. And when they saw me, they said to each other, "Okay, this one's okay. Let's see who she is and why she is sitting on the ground like that, so quiet, as if asleep or in a dream, but anyway, harmless." And so they came on their slender legs and gazed upon me, not unlike the way I go out into the dunes and look and look and look into the faces of flowers. And then one of them leaned forward and nuzzled my hand. And what can my life bring to me that could exceed that brief moment? For 20 years, I have gone every day to the same woods, not waiting exactly, just lingering. Such gifts bestowed cannot be repeated. If you want to talk about this, come to visit. I live in the house near the corner, which I have named Gratitude. When I got to hear Mary Oliver speak, she shared with us that that story was based on a true story, that she was actually lying in a field and she was not sleeping, but she was just lying there still. And a deer came and nuzzled her hand. She said it was just one of the, like the best moments of her entire life. And it reminded me of this experience I had when I was walking in the forest with a Cherokee friend who later became the chief of part of Cherokee. We have a reservation here in North Carolina where the Cherokee live. And I saw a black snake on the path, and I had the weirdest feeling that it was smiling at me. And I said, that's kind of weird because snakes don't smile, but it seemed like it was smiling. So I stopped and I just looked at it and really like locked eyes with it. And the snake came right to me and it laid itself on my feet. And so my friend Diamond, his name was Diamond Brown, he came back down the path to find me and he goes, "Tracey, that snake wants you to pick it up." And I said, "I know, Diamond, I'm terrified, I'm too scared to pick it up." But I knew that that's what it wanted me to do. And so I couldn't quite do it because I was afraid it would bite me or be scared and bite me or something. So I didn't pick it up. But it was such a transcendent moment. It was one of those fabulous moments that you have where you realize that nature perceives you as a friend. And she writes so many times about those kinds of experiences, which I just love. And this one is called Gethsemane. The grass never sleeps, nor the roses, nor does a lily have a secret eye that shuts until morning. Baba said, "Wait with me," but the disciples slept. The cricket has such a splendid fringe on its feet, and it sings, have you noticed, with its whole body, and heaven knows if it ever sleeps. Baba said, wait with me. And maybe the stars did. Maybe the wind wound itself into a silver tree and didn't move. Maybe the lake far away, where once he walked as on a blue pavement, lay still and waited, wild, awake. Oh, the dear bodies, slumped and eye shut, that could not keep that vigil. How they must have wept, so utterly human, knowing this too must be part of the story. This one is called The Uses of Sorrow. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. We were talking recently about grief and how poets use that, and I was reminding the people that I was talking to that it's not very well known, but some people know that Mary Oliver was abused by her father as a child, and that's what that poem is referring to. And I was just sharing how often really the great poets that we know, Rumi and Hafez for sure are two of them, had suffered so much. Hafez was, even though he was famous in his lifetime, there was a fundamentalist regime that, took over his town of Shiraz, and he had to literally live in the woods for a period of time to save his life. And, he was somewhat low key about what he was doing as a Sufi because of fundamentalist people in that area. And both his son and his wife both died before him. And as you all probably know, that beautiful story about him being not handsome and poor and falling in love with a young daughter of a butcher to whom he was, a merchant to whom he was delivering meat where he worked for the butcher. And he went into the famous circle of prayer that Sufism has, where you draw a circle in the ground and you sit in prayer and fast for 40 days, and you have someone attending you. And if you manage to stay in that circle for 40 days, it's said that the angel Gabriel will come and say that your gift will be given. You will be given the thing you've asked for. So he did succeed, and the angel came, and the angel said, "We have heard your request, and we are here to grant that this young girl will love you." And he was so moved by the beauty of this angel that he knew in that moment that it was not the beauty, the love of a beautiful girl that he wanted. It was that he wanted to know the love of God. And so, which we are so grateful to have those poems. This poem is quite famous by Mary Oliver. It's called Wild Geese. And I just love it. And it's actually the last poem, and we're gonna open it up at the end if anybody wants to make comments or questions or just talk about whatever. This one's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are headed home. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So that is the end of Mary Oliver. Feel free to unmute your mic if you'd like to say something or ask questions or talk about that.
Tracey?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mary Oliver's partner live to see her get that Pulitzer Prize?
Yes, and it's an interesting story about her partner, and it's something that really influenced me as a poet because, for a lot of us writers, and you know this, Paula, because you're a writer as well, Fair State, writing is such a solitary experience, and it's one that usually you're probably an introvert if you're doing it in the first place. And when I wrote my book of poetry, when I wrote my poems, I had a very strong intuition that I was supposed to have it published. And I was sort of like, maybe the joy is just in writing it. And then I thought about Mary Malone, who was really behind submitting all those poems for the National Book Award and for the Pulitzer Prize. She did all those things for Mary Oliver. And I thought to myself, gosh, if there wasn't somebody who believed in Mary Oliver and took the time to really put her work out there, we would not have this beautiful poetry to enjoy and to be inspired by. So it really gave me the push to find a publisher and to go out on a tour and share it. And I just love that story about, her partner being so supportive and really bringing her work out into the world. So
That's neat.
she did. Yeah, she did. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tracey, what's the name of your book?
Oh, it's called I Have Fallen in Love with the World and Other Poems. You can find it on Amazon, or you can go to my website, traceyschmidt.com. I wrote it mostly at the center. And a lot of those poems are inspired by Baba tipping his hat in on occasion and saying a few words here and there. Very grateful for that. There's a funny story. I was at the refractory writing, and not the refractory, the space right next to the refractory. I can never remember what it's called, where the small rooms are.
The bungalow?
Yes, I was in the bungalow, and I was going to bed. I had been there at the center writing, and so I had just done some writing, and I was getting ready to go to sleep. And Baba came to me, and he said, as he does so often to so many of us, and he said, I would like to help you write your poetry. And I said, oh no, Baba, I've got this. And I turned the light out, and I tucked myself in my bed, and I laid there for about 5 seconds, and I turned the light back on, and I said, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. Yes, please. And one of the poems in the book is really about that experience of, me realizing that Baba always comes and helps us with our wonderful projects that we're working on.
Tracey, I may have missed this. You may have mentioned it at the beginning, how you came to choose or substitute Baba for what she had in the poetry.
I just, well, I don't know if you remember when Laurent and I were reading poetry together.
Unfortunately, I missed that one.
Oh, you did? Yeah. He was reading Rumi, and I was reading my work and some Hafez. And Laurent substituted the word God for the word Baba. And I was like, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's a Rumi poem. And I was like, I guess you can. So it was just so lovely the way he substituted Baba's name into one of the Rumi poems where Rumi used the word God. And I thought that's really kind of a clever thing to do for Baba lovers. It really helps us to expand our circle of poetry. And so I decided to give myself permission to do that. And I hope it was okay that I did that because Mary Oliver isn't here to say yay or nay about that. So, yeah.
Well, maybe you're influencing her next life. She'll come to write Baba poetry.
Never know, right?
I just wanted to say that when I wrote my story for Irma's book, for one of the volume 3, it was the last one that she had published. And the night that I had finished the story, which I had been working on for months, I was sending it to Carl, and I clicked a button, and my entire manuscript on the computer was gone into the abyss, and it was never able to be recovered. And I mean, it was just gone. And I had spent, it was kind of like my life story. And I was going to the center the next week, and I got to the center, and I was just distraught, very distraught. I was retiring, and I was going to the center for the week. And so I got to the center, and of all things, I was going to be staying in the guest house, and nobody else was staying there. I got to be in the guest house for 3 days without, of my 6 days that I was going to be there, without anybody. And I just sat on Mara's bed. Of course, I was alone in the cabin. I got Mara's bedroom, and I sat there and I wrote my story.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. See, Baba just doesn't.
Whoa.
Baba keeps deleting her story.
Oh, I'm here. Okay, I'm here. So I was in Mara's room, and I wrote the story, and then I went out to the porch on the swing, and a poem came, and so that ended up being in my story, which was not there at the ending, the last thing that I wrote, which was not in the original one. So I felt like that was Baba, Baba's wish to have it, but that was like an amazing experience for me. Yeah.
What a great place to rewrite your story.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Very special.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Tracey. This was such a treat. When I went to sign in, I thought it was going to be Max Reef. And when I saw Mary Oliver, I got very excited because she's my very favorite poet, even more than Hafez and Rumi.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it really was lovely, especially today, because I'm having a hard time with all of this stuff that's going on, like many of us. And it's a gift, really a gift.
Yeah.
To be with you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, from where are you?
I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of DC. In the fire.
Oh, in the fire. Well, nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice to see everybody.
Yeah, I'm remembering, I wondered if anybody else is, that she moved to Florida.
Yeah.
Right? And her talking about how she had to learn to love the Everglades. She had to learn to love that different, which was so different from the Northeast.
I know.
That's in one of her poems, isn't it? About learning to love the Everglades. She wrote a poem about that.
Yeah. She fell in love with someone who lived in Florida, and so she moved to Florida. And I think part of the reason she moved there is because at some point in time, the word really got out that she was walking, in those very special woods on Cape Cod. And I think she was probably getting pretty inundated. She was pretty famous in the latter years of her life. And I suspect she was getting a lot of people who were showing up there, messing up her whole quiet time to write. And she probably needed to get the heck out of Dodge and go somewhere where no one could find her. I really think that's part of why she moved. Because why else would you leave someplace that you love so much?
You love so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where she died, in Florida. Yeah.
Tracey, if I could maybe just get a quick interpretation of yours on